This week is Parshas Chukas Balak, double Parsha. Doesn't happen that often that these two Parshios come together, so it's worth noting when in fact it happens. In Parshas Chukas, we have one of the most enigmatic stories in all of Chumash, and that is Moshe Rabbeinu's hitting of the rock and being therefore prohibited from entering the land of Israel. The question has been asked and answered over the millennia, what is so terrible about Moshe Rabbeinu's having hit the rock? In fact, at the beginning of the 40 years, he hit the rock in order to extract the water. What's so terrible? The fact that he did it now. And dozens and dozens and dozens of answers have been suggested to explain what was the sin of Moshe Rabbeinu. You take them all together, you'd think that Moshe Rabbeinu was really a bad guy, which obviously he was not. Nevertheless, the multiplicity of views on the matter simply reflects the lack of clarity inherent in the Psukim. What was Moshe Rabbeinu's sin? What was so terrible about hitting the rock? The Rambam says it's because Moshe Rabbeinu got upset. He got angry at the people. And the Ramban says it was the very act of hitting the rock itself. And Mayana Shel Torah cites the Kedushas Halevi, that these are actually one and the same. Moshe Rabbeinu got very upset, and as a consequence, he hit the rock. Now, there are two models of leadership, two models of influence, says the Kedushas Halevi. One is a person who gives tochacha, who rebukes the people, who basically beats the best out of them, whether it's through guilt, whether it is through harsh words, whether it is through whether it's through coercion. At the end of the day, he's getting the people to where they have to be, but really not through the best possible way. There's another model of leadership and education and inspiration, and that is helping a person to reveal the best possible version of who they are. Not to beat the best out of them, but to allow the best to simply flow forth from them. Moshe Rabbeinu at this point in time chose the former rather than the latter. He beat the best out of the people, not physically, but it is reflective in his beating and striking the rock. Now, the rock is also a metaphor for Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership of the people. And the rock is the people in this metaphor. Listen to this. Ber Mayim Chaim suggests or states that the word for rock that is used in the Chumash here is one of several possibilities. Even is one possibility. Tzur, another possibility. The word that the Torah chooses for this event, for this story, is Selah. Now, the Selah is a very interesting word. How is it different than a Tzur, than an Even? Some suggest that a Selah is different because the Selah has within it the liquid substance. A rock is an Even or a Tzur might not be the same, but a Selah already has the liquid within it. It has the moisture within it. You have to be able to extract it from the rock. And this is reflected in the way the word Selah, says the Ber Mayim Chaim, is actually written. The word Selah is written Samech Lamed Ayin. However, if it's written B'miloi, which means in its fullness, that is Samech Lamed Ayin Selah, each letter of that word is written out as well. So Samech is Samech Mem Chaf. Lamed, the second letter, is Lamed Mem Daled. Ayin, the third letter of the word, is Ayin Yud Nun. So if you write this word out in its fullness, b'milui, you get the middle letter, the center letter of each word is Samech, the middle letter is Mem. Ayin, the middle letter is Yud. And Lamed, the middle letter is Mem, which is Mayim. So even the way this word is written in its fullness, inside the word you have Mayim. So you have Selah on the exterior, it's a rock on the exterior, you have this dead, inanimate object in the exterior, but inside you have Mayim Chayim, you have the water of life, which itself is a metaphor for Torah, for spirituality, for God, for Judaism. So Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership of the people is reflected in how he attempts to extract the water from the rock. Now the water is in the rock. There are two ways you could possibly do it. Says the Kedushas Halevi. You can either through beating the best out of the person, through striking the rock, or through somehow enabling the rock to reveal its inner self. Right? This is all metaphor upon metaphor here. So Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership of the people is reflected in how he dealt with the rock. Moshe Rabbeinu appropriately rebuked the Jewish people. Moshe Rabbeinu appropriately had to coerce the Jewish people. Moshe appropriately had to use strong words during his tenure as leader in order to get the people to a certain level of maturation. So when the Jews come out of Mitzrayim, they're like newborns. They're like little children. They were slaves, and now they have to accept responsibility for life. So Moshe Rabbeinu has to guide them. And in their infancy, Moshe Rabbeinu can't reason with them. Moshe Rabbeinu can't just use flowery language to inspire them. In their infancy, when they are children, Moshe Rabbeinu had to use what was available to him, and that is to strike the rock. And that's what he did early on. He struck the rock to get out the water. That was Moshe Rabbeinu's leadership style. He used tochacha. He rebuked the people. He used strong language. He used the methodology to, quote unquote, beat the best out of the people. Not physically, but he beat the best out of them. But beating the best out of the people is not really a long-term strategy. And certainly is not a good strategy once they've reached a certain level of maturation. When a child reaches whatever appropriate age, it's time to shift gears. You can no longer strike the rock. You have to help reveal the child to reveal the best of who they are. Moshe Rabbeinu stood here at a transition point, at an inflection point for Klal Yisrael. They're about to leave the Midbar and have to stand on their own 2 feet in Eretz Yisrael. They were no longer going to be led by miracles, by Ananei HaKavod, by a fire in the desert. They were going to have to do and act and work and stand on their own 2 feet. You cannot beat that out of people. You cannot coerce them into that. This has to come from themselves. And it's there. The Mayim Chayim is there. It's within the soul of every Jew. It's within the soul of every human being. We just have to be able to reveal it. Moshe Rabbeinu was told, now it's time to leave the staff aside and sit down next to the people and talk to them. Use your power of persuasion. Inspire them through your words, through your logic, through your powerful knowledge. That's the way to get the people. Because once they've absorbed these ideas, they're going to do it on their own. It will naturally flow forth. Speak to the rock, and the water will come. Hit the rock, and you will have to extract it from them. Moshe Rabbeinu was not forced out of Eretz Yisrael as a punishment per se. Moshe Rabbeinu was no longer the right leader for the people. Because although Moshe Rabbeinu appropriately dealt with the people when they left Mitzrayim, when they were in their infancy, in one way, now that they've reached a certain inflection point and maturity level, the era of extraction is over. And the era for generating, motivating, and allowing the people to flow, to have their water flow forth from themselves, that is the new era. And that will demand an entirely new form of leadership. If we want to be able to influence our children, or students, or a neighbor, or a family member, you can beat the best out of them, metaphorically speaking. You can yell at them, you can scream at them, you can coerce them, you can beat them into submission by dint of your loudness, by dint of your toughness, or you can sit down and talk to them, and through the power of persuasion, allow them to reveal the best of who they are. If we want to create a society, not just children, not just our grandchildren or our neighbors or our family members, but if we want to influence society and to create a society which is a more perfect union, the way to do it is not through intimidation, through force, through striking the rock, but through influence and persuasion and allowing the best of ourselves to flow forth. The water is there. The Mayim Chayim is there within each and every one of us. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu bless us that we are able to create a society in which we all can express the best of who we are. Good Shabbos.